This is Kalyana. She has been a foster child since birth, living with 5 other foster siblings. Like any family, she argues and fights with her siblings. Unlike other families, she and her siblings have never gotten along. She and her siblings were homeschooled and were never let out of the house. Kalyana's foster parents never treated any of them well. Her mother was physically abusive to everyone in the household, including her father. All she ever witnessed were her parents fighting, yelling at each other, and throwing objects across the room. Her father never laid a harmful hand on anyone, but constantly ignored the mother's actions. He would turn away when Kalyana's mother beats her, and did nothing when her mother put a knife to her throat. Whenever a foster child complains about the horrendous actions of their mother, their father attacks them with words. Kalyana spent plenty of sleepless nights, being yelled at by her father for being a worthless waste that no one would ever love. Everyone in the house became accustomed to their harsh reality that people are full of hatred, and the more a person lashes out, the more superior they are. One day, Kalyana notices the door accidentally left unlocked. She slips out to see cream-colored houses lined side by side. People were waving to each other. They were doing this weird thing with their faces which made their eyes light up, and their teeth were showing in a way that wasn't a scowl. A person bikes past her and greets her a good morning. Kalyana is terrified. This scenario made her think, perhaps these people are actually robots, and her family was what was left of humanity. She becomes frozen in shock for a few minutes before she manages to walk down the street. A little girl suddenly walks up to her, gives her a flower, and runs away. Kalyana stares at the flower in her hand and feels a weird thing in her chest. She thinks she's having a heart attack. She feels a little warm, and a smile slowly crept up on her face. Kalyana sneaks back into her house to tell her siblings about the wonderful experience she had. However, all her siblings did was make fun of her for believing a fairy tale story. Her brother tells her she is probably a schizophrenic, and then made fun of her for being the biggest problem child. The more Kalyana persists that what she witnessed was real, the more her siblings became annoyed. That night, a couple of her sisters light a match while she was sleeping and burned the tips of her toes. Fed up and in pain, Kalyana sneaks out of the house again, taking advantage of what seems to be a broken lock on the door. Cold and alone at night, Kalyana wanders to a nearby park. An elder man notices her and offers her some of his warm tea. Used to the abuse and paranoia, she slaps the cup out of his hands and tries to run away, making her trip over her own legs. He slowly walks closer to her, and she shuffles backwards in fear. He keeps his distance and told her everything is okay. He walks away, and she was left on the floor confused. He returns later that night and places a blanket about 2 meters away from her. He walks backwards slowly, trying to reassure her from a distance. Kalyana picks up the blanket and covers herself with it, and she runs towards him, giving him a hug. Tears fall from her face as she trembles in the man's arms. As days go by, new people try to help Kalyana. Though experiencing these kind acts, she is never able to fully trust them. She second-guesses people's intentions and constantly wonders if this is a part of a larger plot to hurt her when she finally puts all her defenses down. When people ignore her, she always witnesses people interacting with each other. They exchange gifts, have picnics, and tell each other stories. One lady was upset about something, and her friend consoled her. Kalyana realizes the world is safer than she had previously thought, but she could never shake off the feeling of paranoia. Months pass, and Kalyana notices one boy that's about her age who gives her food every day. He never says anything to her, but always hands her food and walks away to sit at a nearby bench. Finally, she gets the courage to sit beside him. She doesn't say anything at first, but later found herself venting to the boy. She stops herself abruptly and walked back to the bench she was on before. The boy's mother calls out his name, "Kremoski," and he runs off. The next day, he comes by again to give Kalyana some food, but this time, he stands in front of her with something on his back. He swings it over in front of him, and Kalyana flinches. He starts scraping his nails across metal wires and created a nice sound she has never heard before. "You're gorgeous like the sun, when it sets, when it rises," Kremoski sings to Kalyana. After the song ends, Kremoski invites Kalyana to his house for a meal, and Kalyana gladly accepts. Her heart races in fear. Flashbacks of her foster parents come flooding back. Kremoski takes her hand and smiles at her. She smiles back and calms down as she takes a seat at the dining table. By the end of the meal, Kalyana regains trust in those around her by finally knowing what it feels like to be included in a healthy family. Kremoski's parents offer their house for her to live in, and she accepts their gracious offer, fear-free.